Olivia Kane had always been Daddy's little girl, growing up on her father's sprawling ranch in Montana, where he taught her everything about running cattle, managing the land, and building the successful agricultural empire that had been in their family for 4 generations, never imagining that a gold-digging woman would eventually manipulate her grieving father and steal everything he had worked his entire life to build. At 26, Olivia was completing her master's degree in agricultural business when her beloved mother died suddenly from cancer, leaving her father Robert Kane devastated and vulnerable to the calculated charms of Veronica Sterling, a 40-something divorcee who targeted wealthy widowers through online dating sites and grief support groups, using their emotional vulnerability to gain access to their assets and affections. Robert, who had been married to Olivia's mother for 30 years and had never dated anyone else, was completely unprepared for Veronica's sophisticated manipulation tactics, falling for her fake tears and manufactured vulnerability as she claimed to understand his grief. Because she had also lost the love of her life in a car accident that Olivia later discovered had never actually happened. Within 6 months of meeting Veronica at a grief counseling session that she had infiltrated, specifically to find wealthy targets, Robert had married her in a small ceremony that he claimed was what your mother would have wanted, despite the fact that Olivia barely knew this woman, who had somehow convinced her father to move faster than he had ever moved in any major life decision. Veronica immediately began isolating Robert from his longtime friends and business associates, claiming that they were negative influences who didn't understand his need to move forward and embrace happiness again, while simultaneously positioning herself as his new business partner and convincing him that Olivia was too young and inexperienced to handle the responsibilities that came with inheriting the family ranch and agricultural operations. She convinced Robert that modern farming required fresh perspectives and professional management, rather than sentimental attachment to outdated family traditions, gradually undermining his confidence in Olivia's abilities while promoting her own supposed expertise in agricultural investment and land development. The warning signs became obvious to everyone except Robert, as Veronica began making expensive purchases and renovations to the family home, claiming that she needed to modernize the property to reflect Robert's success and sophistication, while also pressuring him to update his will and estate planning documents to protect their new marriage and ensure proper tax advantages. She brought in her own lawyer and financial advisor, claiming that Robert's longtime attorney was too old-fashioned to understand complex estate planning strategies, and convinced him that transferring assets into joint ownership and establishing new trusts would provide better protection for their combined family, which she claimed now included her adult children from her previous marriage, who had suddenly appeared and begun visiting the ranch regularly. Olivia became increasingly concerned as she watched her father's personality change under Veronica's influence, noticing that he seemed confused and forgetful during their phone calls, often unable to remember conversations they had just had or decisions he had supposedly made about the ranch operations, which had always been his passion and area of expertise. When Olivia visited the ranch during her spring break, she was shocked to discover that Veronica had redecorated her childhood bedroom and converted her mother's art studio into an office where she conducted mysterious business meetings with people who seemed more like con artists than legitimate agricultural professionals, and that several of the ranch's most valuable breeding Cattle had been sold without any documentation or explanation of where the money had gone. The devastating blow came when Robert died suddenly from what appeared to be a heart attack, just 18 months after marrying Veronica, leaving Olivia not only grieving the loss of her father, but also discovering that the will reading revealed a completely different estate plan than what her father had always promised her, with the vast majority of his assets going to Veronica and her children, while Olivia received only a small cash inheritance and some personal items that had belonged to her mother. Veronica claimed that Robert had realized that leaving everything to Olivia would be unfair to his new family, and that he had wanted to provide security for his wife and stepchildren, presenting documents that showed a pattern of systematic asset transfers and will modifications that had occurred during the months leading up to his death. Olivia's world collapsed as she realized that not only had she lost her father, but she had also lost the ranch that had been her home, her inheritance, and her planned future, while Veronica moved quickly to take control of all the family assets and began making plans to sell the property to developers who wanted to subdivide the land for luxury housing, destroying 4 generations of agricultural heritage for quick profit. When Olivia tried to contest the will, Veronica's lawyer presented what appeared to be extensive documentation of Robert's mental competency and clear intentions, including video recordings of him explaining his decisions and expressing his love for his new wife and stepchildren, making any legal challenge seem hopeless and expensive. For months, Olivia struggled with depression and financial hardship, working as a ranch hand for other families while living in a tiny apartment and watching helplessly as Veronica systematically dismantled everything her father had built, selling off equipment, livestock, and land parcels to fund an increasingly lavish lifestyle that included expensive cars, jewelry, and vacations with her adult children who had never shown any interest in agriculture, but were suddenly very interested in their inheritance. The breaking point came when Olivia learned that Veronica was planning to sell the family cemetery where 4 generations of Cains were buried, including Olivia's mother, to make room for a shopping center development that would desecrate her family's final resting place for commercial profit. Determined to fight back, Olivia used her agricultural business education and research skills to begin investigating Veronica's background, discovering that her real name was actually Victoria Sims, and that she had a criminal history spanning multiple states, with previous convictions for elder abuse, financial fraud, and identity theft that had somehow been hidden during the background checks that Robert's lawyer should have conducted before the marriage. Olivia learned that Veronica had used similar tactics to target at least 6 other wealthy widowers over the past 15 years, marrying them quickly, isolating them from their families, manipulating their estate planning, and then benefiting from their convenient deaths that always seemed to occur within 2 years of the marriage. The breakthrough came when Olivia discovered that one of Robert's former business partners had been secretly recording conversations with him during the months before his death. Concerned about his apparent mental decline and confusion, and these recordings revealed that Robert had been experiencing symptoms consistent with drugging or poisoning, including memory loss, confusion, and personality changes that were completely out of character for the sharp, decisive man he had always been. The recordings also captured Robert expressing confusion about documents he had supposedly signed and decisions he couldn't remember, suggesting that Veronica had been forging his signature or manipulating him while he was in a compromised mental state. Olivia took this evidence to a private investigator who specialized in elder abuse cases, and together they uncovered a sophisticated fraud scheme that included forged documents, backdated legal papers, and medical records that had been altered to hide evidence of the drugs that Veronica had been using to keep Robert compliant and confused during the final months of his life. The investigation revealed that Veronica's grief counselor credentials were fake. Her previous husband had died under suspicious circumstances similar to Robert's, and that she had been systematically draining Robert's accounts and transferring assets to offshore accounts, controlled by her adult children, who were actually her partners in the con rather than legitimate heirs. The most damning evidence came when the investigator discovered that Veronica had been using a sophisticated network of fake identities and forged documents to create an entire false history, including fabricated business credentials, fake references, and even counterfeit death certificates for her supposed previous husband, allowing her to craft whatever tragic backstory would be most effective for manipulating her current target. The toxicology report that Olivia thought to have performed on her father's body revealed high levels of prescription medications that he had never been prescribed, combined with alcohol and other substances that would have caused the exact symptoms of confusion and memory loss that his friends had noticed during his final months. When Olivia presented this evidence to federal investigators who specialized in interstate fraud and elder abuse, they launched a comprehensive investigation that revealed Veronica's criminal network had stolen millions of dollars from vulnerable widowers across multiple states, using the same pattern of manipulation, isolation, drugging, and document forgery that had been used against Robert. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Robert's death had not been a natural heart attack, but had been caused by a deliberate overdose of medications that Veronica had been administering to keep him compliant, making her not just a fraud and a thief, but also a murderer who had killed Olivia's father to avoid the risk of him recovering his mental clarity and discovering her crimes. The trial became a national news story as prosecutors presented evidence of Veronica's decade-long career as a serial killer who targeted wealthy widowers, using their grief and loneliness to gain access to their assets before murdering them and stealing their estates, with Robert being just the latest victim in a pattern of calculated murders disguised as natural deaths or accidents. Olivia testified about watching her father's personality change under Veronica's influence and described the devastating impact of losing both her father and her inheritance to someone who had never loved him, but had only seen him as a target for financial exploitation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding Veronica guilty on multiple counts of murder, fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole, and the complete forfeiture of all assets she had stolen from her victims, including the full restoration of Robert's estate to Olivia as his rightful heir. Veronica's adult children, who had been active participants in the fraud scheme, also received significant prison sentences and were ordered to pay restitution to the families of all their mother's victims, while the entire criminal network was dismantled by federal investigators. 2 years later, Olivia had not only recovered her family's ranch and restored it to full operation, but had also used her experience to establish a foundation that educated families about the warning signs of elder abuse and provided legal assistance to other victims of inheritance fraud, turning her personal tragedy into a mission to protect other families from the kind of predators who had destroyed her father and stolen her legacy. The ranch became more successful than ever, as Olivia implemented modern agricultural techniques while honoring her family's traditional values, and she established a memorial garden on the property where her father was finally laid to rest next to her mother, with a plaque that honored his memory while warning future generations about the importance of protecting elderly family members from those who would exploit their vulnerability for financial gain.